This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Whoops. Is it morning? It is morning. Boy, can I do this? I can do that. Yay. Except I probably shouldn't have had that. What the heck? Okay, Scribe, let's try this again. We're doing a news article, so we don't want that up. We just want this up, right? Yes. And then we want the thing. There we go. I'm sorry, guys. My brain is still working. Okay. You know what? You know what? Hell with it. I want a mulligan. This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream, the stream I do on Sundays because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays. Hopefully, when I finally woken up. Apparently that's now, thankfully. How are you all doing? Hope you're all doing. Hoy caramba. Man, if you can't tell, I didn't sleep too good last night. I kind of got up only about an hour ago, and that was dragging myself out of bed. It's been a wonky few nights for different reasons. I got woken up yesterday early morning to police activity near me, which wasn't fun, and that threw me off for the better part of the last 2 days or day and a half, whatever it is now. So anyway, my troubles aside, how are you? Hope you're all doing well on this beautiful Sunday morning. It actually is pretty nice out. It's nice and sunny. It's not too hot yet, but we'll see how the day proceeds. Before I get into all the wonderfulness that I have to relay to you all, who's joining me this morning on this beautiful Sunday morning? Let's see. Plague Trucker, good morning. Keeverdam, good morning. Old Guy Gamer, good morning. Advocatus Diaboli, good morning. Cephtus Wolf, good morning. Mike Savage, blarg. Random American, good morning. And also, Random American says, was just about to go to breakfast, so I leave this running just for the view. Thank you, Random. That's very nice of you. Appreciate it. Mike R., good morning. Noah Asensio, good morning. Bridget, good morning. A Scanner Daffley, good morning. Resolute Germ, good morning. Somnamnul Nation, good morning. Robert Pincus, good morning. Urcule Di Stefano, good morning. Spoonie the Rebel, good morning. Let's see, who else? Anybody else? Scrolling. You're Ridiculous Lunatic, good morning. And I think that's everybody. If I missed you. Oh, Juggernaut, good morning. I'm the Juggernaut. Hope you're all doing well on this beautiful Sunday morning. And yes, I thought it was time again after some recent events in immigration and border news to do another immigration and border news digest. So I'm going to walk us through a few articles from the last couple of weeks and also the distant past for comparison and contrast. To see what's going on in the wonderful world of our border, the U.S.-Mexico border, and also immigration situations in general. So, to begin, let us go back to the misty past of August 23rd for some more legal information on the White House versus the law, I suppose. A key part of the White House's strategy for the U.S.-Mexico border goes on trial. This is from August 23rd, NPR. When the White House announced a new way for migrants from Haiti to come to the U.S. legally back in January, Valerie Levius wasted no time. Quote, I was like, God, you answer prayers. I am so grateful, and I jumped on it, unquote, said Levius, a school teacher in Florida who's helping her brother and nephew come to the U.S. The two are among the more than 180,000 migrants from Haiti, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela who have been admitted to the U.S. under the new program with permission to live and work here for 2 years. The Biden administration says it's part of a broader strategy to discourage illegal immigration at the U.S.-Mexico border by opening up new legal alternatives. Blech. Quote, "We have overseen the most significant expansion in lawful pathways for people to come to the United States in many decades," unquote, said Blaise Nunez Neto. I hope I'm saying that correctly, or if I'm not, apologies, a top immigration official at the Department of Homeland Security in May. After years of record apprehensions at the southern border, the administration's new approach is a mix of incentives and disincentives. In other words, carrots and sticks. Yes, that is a correct simile, thank you. Intended to discourage migrants from crossing the border illegally. Well, are they working? But the strategy is being challenged in court, both by immigrant advocates and immigration hardliners. What? Now a case brought by Texas and other states is heading for trial. A dispute over the legal authority known as parole. These states accuse the Biden administration of creating, quote, "a new visa program that allows hundreds of thousands of aliens to enter the United States who otherwise have no basis for doing so," unquote, according to the lawsuit. Quote, "This flouts rather than follows the clear limits imposed by Congress," unquote. The Biden administration argues that it does have a legal basis for what it's doing, an authority known as parole. In the past, presidents of both parties have used parole to admit non-citizens into the country, sometimes in substantial numbers. Now, before I keep reading, I have a feeling that it has been implemented in the past in very specific circumstances and not as a broad range program. Because as we've seen with both student loan debt and other things, the Biden administration likes to take small rules from places and try to expand them out to do things they were never meant to do in the first place. Like giving the CDC control over our lives and things like that. Anyway, no administration has relied on parole quite this much. The Biden administration has used parole programs to admit more than 500,000 people into the country, including hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians and tens of thousands of Afghans. Well, I hope NPR tells us how it has been used historically. Quote, "This administration has used parole as the vehicle to create an entirely separate illegal system of admitting foreigners to the United States," unquote, says Mark Krikorian, executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies, a think tank in Washington, D.C. that advocates for lower levels of immigration. Krikorian says parole was intended to give authorities some wiggle room, but it's supposed to be handed out on a case-by-case basis. There's an equal sign there. I wonder if that's like a subliminal message from NPR. When there's a significant public benefit in doing so. Quote, "The idea of using parole to admit numbers that reach the thousands is preposterous," Krikorian says. Again, the Biden administration likes to expand on minor powers that they possess and turn them into the whole new things. They really like to do that. The Biden administration insists that it is making decisions on a case-by-case basis, just, tens of thousands at a time, case by case, and that the new parole programs do have substantial public benefits because they discourage migrants from crossing the southern border illegally. Okay, hold on a second. While I understand that more people from different countries can and have arrived at our southern border from countries other than Mexico or Central American countries, if this is benefiting primarily Ukrainians and Afghans, I don't think it's having that much of an effect at our southern border where people are originating from countries, other than Afghanistan or Ukraine for the most part. Okay, I mean, maybe I've lost my mind here, but last I checked, Afghanistan and the Ukraine do not border the United States at its southernmost point. Immigration officials say the new border policies are working. They point to a sharp drop in apprehensions in late May and June, although those numbers began to climb again in July. Oh. Well, I guess it was a temporary Band-Aid. The Justice Department will likely make those arguments in court later this week when a federal judge in Victoria, Texas, holds a crucial hearing starting on Thursday. U.S. District Judge Drew Tipton has already ruled against the Biden administration in several other high-profile immigration cases, though his ruling was ultimately reversed by the Supreme Court in one of them. I said in one of them. NPR says in one them. I mentally corrected for NPR, even though I've also stumbled over their own text so far. The Department of Justice tried unsuccessfully to have the case transferred away from Tipton, arguing that the plaintiffs filed their case in Victoria because they were seeking a friendly judge. Department of Justice, you want to talk to us about friendly judges and friendly prosecutors and things? Hunter Biden. Families and friends of migrants line up in support. The Biden administration is also receiving help in the case from some who are supporting their friends and relatives from abroad. Okay, so yes, we must be concerned about a potentially biased and friendly judge, but friends and relatives from abroad, they don't. Okay. A group of those supporters has moved to intervene in the case. Okay, quote, not only is this entirely consistent with the law, it's not, but it's also no different from what other administrations have done for years, unquote, says Monica Langarcia, a lawyer with the UCLA Center for Immigration Law and Policy, which is helping to represent the supporters along with the Justice Action Center and RACES, RAICES. They don't tell us what that means. It's entirely consistent with the law, but it's also no different from what other administrations have done for years. Why do you have to make that comparison and contrast? It's no different. So if an administration from the past abused a minor ability or power that it possessed and turned it into something that it was not meant to be, that's okay. Two wrongs make a right? You're a lawyer? Okay. Those supporters include Valerie Lavius, who brought her brother and nephew to Florida from Haiti. Lavius was born in Haiti and came to the U.S. when she was 18. She's now a U.S. citizen and a teacher in South Florida. For years, Lavius has been trying to get a green card for her brother as conditions in Haiti got worse and worse. When she first heard about the parole program, she was elated until she learned that Texas and other states were suing to block the program. Quote, I heard about the fact that they're trying to cancel it, Lavius said, and quote, my heart sunk to my feet, unquote. Well, have your brother and nephew go through the regular process. Why has it been? You've been trying to get a green card for her brother. Okay, well, what from the normal procedures has stopped you or stopped your brother from attaining a green card? I mean, is it just the bureaucracy? Because I could see that. But, okay. Finally, their application was approved. Okay, Lavius' brother and nephew flew to join her in Florida earlier this month. Quote, all anybody wants who lives in unrest is to have peace, to have some family time, to be able to get the basic needs met, Lavius said. Quote, instead of living in fear of death, fear of hunger, unquote. The group of supporters also includes German Cadenas, a professor of psychology at Rutgers University who sponsored his uncle from Venezuela. Quote, he's just a very decent, good human being, and for me to be able to help him ease the burden that he's been under has been incredibly rewarding, unquote, Cardenas said. Quote, it's the least I can do. And it's the least the country can do, Cadenas says, to keep these legal pathways open. Okay, well, that wasn't a quote. That was from the author. And we don't know if it's legal because it's being prosecuted and decided in the courts. It could very well not be legal. And here's the thing, in the example that we were given from Lavius, if you've been trying to get your brother a green card for some time, and for some reason that we don't know and are not told, you're not being allowed to get that green card, he's now on parole, which means now he's cut through the process that was established for everybody else. For what reason? I mean, supposedly we have mechanisms in place to help people who are actually escaping a natural disaster or, civil war or something like that. And Haiti, I would assume, qualifies somewhere in there. So why was your brother not allowed to this point? These are all questions we don't have answers to. Thank you so much. Holy cats. Stoka, Brett eyed. I got my green card last night. Okay, well, now you can legally drive around your awesome yellow car. I guess before you were just winging it. Thank you so much, Brett. I appreciate it. That's very generous of you. Hope you're having a good Sunday morning. Well, there's our first story. So yeah, the Biden administration once again, and just for clarity, this is not me saying the Biden administration is the only presidential administration to take some minor ability in some old law somewhere and try to turn it into something it's not. But boy, oh boy, have they been doing that quite a bit in the last 4 years. Taking some obscure little legal exception and deciding that that is now a wholly different program. Like they did with student loan forgiveness, like they're apparently trying to do now with parole. Parole for what? And the other thing, too, that I didn't like about this article is that NPR did not explain what the parole exception was created for specifically at its origination, but also how it has been used historically up to this point, just that it hasn't been used this much. Okay, well, when has it been used and to what extent and for what purpose? Okay, thanks, NPR. I'll have to look this one up, see if there was any update on it. I didn't get an update on this one. I guess they were going to trial at the time, but it's only been a couple of weeks, so it's probably still in process. Anyway, let's move on, if we shall, to another story. So that one was from August 23rd. I put all of these into chronological order, except for one, which we'll get to because I want to use it as compare and contrast. Moving on, if I can get this. Here we go. I talked about this in the last digest, and the story is continuing. Court order allows Texas floating barrier on U.S.-Mexico border to remain in place for now. I'm curious to see if the AP article describes exactly what the government's complaint about the floating barrier was, that they were trying to get it taken away, because it's something else. A federal appeals court. Oh, sorry. This was published on September 7th, so just 3 days ago. A federal appeals court on Thursday allowed Texas's floating barrier on a section of the Rio Grande to stay in place for now, a day after a judge called the buoys a threat to the safety of migrants and relations between the U.S. and Mexico. Well, it's interesting that the judge said that. What was the government's actual argument about removing the buoys? Let's see if the article says. The order by the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals puts on hold a ruling that would have required Texas to move the wrecking ball-sized buoys on the river by next week. The barrier is near the Texas border city of Eagle Pass, where Republican Governor Greg Abbott has authorized a series of aggressive measures in the name of discouraging migrants from crossing into the U.S. The stay granted by the New Orleans-based appeals court lets the barrier remain in the water while the legal challenge continues. The lawsuit was brought by the Justice Department in a rare instance of President Joe Biden's administration going to court to challenge Texas's border policies. On Wednesday, U.S. District Judge David Ezra of Austin ordered Texas to move the roughly 1,000-foot barrier out of the middle of the Rio Grande and to the riverbank, calling it a, quote, threat to human life and an obstruction on the waterway. Okay, it's that last part. It's that last part that actually is more pertinent to the DOJ's argument. The Mexican government has also protested the barrier. Why? I might have to look at that one. In seeking a swift order to allow the buoys to remain, Texas told the appeals court the buoys reroute migrants to ports of entry and that, quote, no injury from them has been reported, unquote. Last month, a body was found near the buoys, but Texas officials said preliminary information indicated the person drowned before coming near the barriers. Texas installed the barrier by putting anchors in the riverbed. Eagle Pass is part of a border patrol section that has seen the second highest number of migrants crossing this fiscal year, with about 270,000 encounters, though that is lower than at this time last year. Okay. The Biden administration has said illegal border crossings declined after new immigration rules took effect in May as pandemic-related asylum restrictions expired. Okay, thank you, AP. No. Are you going to mention the fact that they went back up in July? No, you're not. Okay, so what was the Department of Justice's main complaint about the buoys? Was it that they endangered people's lives? Was it that they were illegal? Well, the only legality that they could come up with was they were acting as a detriment to the flow of the waterway. That was the DOJ's main legal argument. They were obstructing the natural flow of the waterway. This judge has inserted this threat to human life thing when there's no evidence that it is. But yeah, now what was, I got to check now. What was the Mexican government's, this is going to take me to an AP story. Okay. What was the Mexican government's complaint on this? A surprise extra article. Let's go to that real quick. Mexico files border boundaries complaint over Texas's floating barrier plan on Rio Grande. Oh, so they say it like constitutes a change of the actual border, even though it's in the middle of the river. How did I don't know the question of this, maybe the article will answer. Where does the U.S. side of the Rio Grande end and the Mexican side begin? Is it literally just like in the the riverbed kind of thing? Mexico's top diplomat said Friday her country has sent a diplomatic note to the U.S. government expressing concern that Texas's deployment of floating barriers on the Rio Grande may violate 1944 and 1970 treaties on boundaries and water. Foreign Relations Secretary Alicia Barcina said Mexico will send an inspection team to the Rio Grande to see whether any of the barrier extends into Mexico's side of the border river. She also complained about U.S. efforts to put up barbed wire on a low-lying island in the river near Eagle Pass, Texas. Barbed wire on a low-lying island. Hadn't heard that one before. Barcina said that if the buoys impede the flow of water, it would violate the treaties, which require the river remain unobstructed. Mexico has already asked that the barriers be removed. Texas began rolling out the new floating barrier on the Rio Grande in early July, et cetera, and so forth, things we've already covered. Okay, all right. Well, I mean, if there's an established rule that says you cannot obstruct the waterway, okay, well, I stand corrected. Although, again, it was more interesting for the U.S. government and then that judge to say it was threatening people's lives when so far there's been no evidence that it has. Okay, AP, I don't care. I really don't care. All right. Well, there's that. So the floating buoy barrier is still in flux. So I suppose we'll find out how that proceeds as it goes to the courts. Learn something new every day. Moving on. Take a look at this one, the one that I'm most concerned about when it comes to these things, and that is the inevitable deaths and or injuries that occur when policies or procedures fail. Migrant deaths crossing U.S.-Mexico border hit 500. Extra agents dispatched to help prevent them. Some just don't make it. Yeah, it's true. Migrant deaths while crossing the U.S. Oh, sorry, pardon me. This is also for those of you listening at home. This is the New York Post from September 8th, 2 days ago. Migrant deaths while crossing the U.S.-Mexico border have hit 500 this year, with 134 in just one area alone. Extra Border Patrol agents have been dispatched to the desert west of El Paso, where deaths have skyrocketed in 2023. Most have died from heat exhaustion during this year's record-breaking temperatures, perishing in the dusty desert expanses, which offer little shade or protection from the elements. Quote, smugglers were crossing migrants during the hottest part of the day, and some just don't make it, one agent said, speaking on condition of anonymity. Why? It's a fact. Okay. During 1 week in August, 5 migrants died of heat exhaustion, federal sources tell the Post, prompting the agents from other areas to be transferred to El Paso, currently the 4th busiest border crossing in the nation. The vast majority of the area's 134 deaths are heat-related, the U.S. Border Patrol told the Post. That number is up 88% from 71 deaths last year. Up 88%. The nationwide total of over 500 in 2023 was first reported by the New York Times. In one recent case in El Paso, agents found an unidentified Mexican man on a sweltering afternoon during a 104-degree day. The migrant was having seizures and did not have a pulse when discovered. Agents immediately began trying to revive him and called 911. The ambulance arrived just 9 minutes later, but the man had gone into cardiac arrest from his high core body temperature and died, the department stated. In just 1 week in July, the remains of 10 migrants believed to have died of heat exhaustion were found across the entire border, reported the Washington Office on Latin America. In Arizona, a 9-year-old migrant boy died who had just crossed the border south of Tucson, started to have a seizure. Wait, what? In Arizona, a 9-year-old migrant boy died who had just crossed the border south of Tucson, started to have a seizure. That is a badly constructed sentence. Despite being airlifted to the hospital, the boy died of multiple organ failure, the Border Patrol described in a June press release. The boy's mother told investigators her son did not have prior medical conditions and had been in suffocating heat and without water for over an hour before he became sick. Normally, human traffickers lay low during the hottest times of the day, opting to sneak migrants across the border when the sun has set and temperatures are coolest. Okay, so the boy's mother, what was her involvement in him being there in the first place? I know, I must have just a cast iron heart or something to wonder, what was this boy's mother thinking? Was she there? Was she involved in him crossing the border? 9-year-old kid. We're not going to talk about that part, huh? Okay. But this year, Texas's second hottest on record, heartless cartel smugglers went ahead with illegal crossings despite used triple-digit temperatures. Despite used. Okay. Despite used triple-digit temperatures in Santa Teresa, New Mexico. Just outside Texas, the remote region is a hotbed for migrant smuggling. There, criminals are banking on lower surveillance from Border Patrol due to the searing heat. Okay, quote, the dead either get lost in the desert or left behind by coyotes, smugglers, the agent added. Quote, we found some just feet from the highway. Are we really still at a point where when someone talks about coyotes, in reference to immigration issues, we have to clarify that we're talking about human smugglers? Do people read that and actually think that coyotes, actual animal coyotes, are leading people across the desert? I suppose. The agent was referring to New Mexico State Highway 9, which runs parallel to the U.S.-Mexico border. Traffickers guide desperate and clueless legal migrants, across the border, sources told the Post, and instruct them to run to the road, in some cases just a few hundred yards away. Oftentimes, a car is waiting to pick up the immigrants and take them to their next location inside the U.S. The smugglers slip back into Mexico and out of the reach of American law enforcement, while the migrants sprint towards the road and to the getaway car. However, sometimes the driver gets spooked and drives off or simply isn't there in the first place. Or they overload an SUV full of people, and then they drive off and then are chased by Border Patrol agents, and then they crash and several people get injured or killed. Or they get packed into, the backs of like 18-wheeler tractor trailer trucks and left to suffocate in a Walmart parking lot. Or they run out into traffic and get hit by cars, or a zillion other things. This forces illegal immigrants whose main goal is to evade Border Patrol to stop and hope the federal agents find them while exposed to the glaring elements. The Border Patrol, whose mission is to save all lives on the border regardless as part of its mission to keep it safe, slam the Mexican cartels for their ruthless tactics. Well, I'm sure the Mexican cartels are feeling very ashamed right now. Quote, transnational criminal organizations continue to recklessly endanger the lives of individuals they smuggle for their own financial gain. So you mean to tell me that criminal organizations are behaving criminally? Oh, all right. Said Border Patrol spokesman Landon Hutchins to the Post in a statement. Human smuggling is a $13 billion a year business for cartels, the U.S. government estimates. Smuggler cruelty led to the deadliest case of human smuggling in the U.S. last year when 53 migrants died as a result of being locked in an abandoned big rig in San Antonio, Texas. Federal prosecutors have said the internal temperature of the truck reached 140 degrees, while migrants were without air conditioning, water, and locked inside the boxcar. El Paso sector has more than 150 agents trained as emergency medical technicians or paramedics. Every Border Patrol agent is trained in first aid and CPR. Agents are shifted within sector to areas with increased migrant traffic as operations require, unquote, the agency said in a statement. Additionally, the department has also deployed 17 rescue beacons and 500 rescue placards in high traffic areas so distressed migrants can't get help even if they don't have a phone. Jeez. Agents in the El Paso sector have also rescued over 485 migrants this financial year, which started in October. Quote, we want to save some lives, unquote, Border Patrol agent Fidel Baca told KFOX TV. Quote, when we're patrolling out here in the desert, we have to switch instantly. We have to change our mentality from a law enforcement mentality to a search and rescue mentality. Can you even imagine? I don't think many people could. Can you even imagine the amount of stress and just mental exhaustion and emotional damage, emotional damage, that these guys have to go through doing this job. You know, on the one hand, having to enforce federal law, on the other hand, having to save people who are throwing themselves willingly into a meat grinder, right? And especially when it comes to the children, just anyway. Let's see. Those ain't real, dude. Good news, the driver is there. Bad news, he's drunk and has warrants outstanding. Yeah, probably. You know, or again, as we've seen in multiple cases, drive so erratically and recklessly and dangerously with an overfilled car that they crash and burn and people get hurt anyway. Okay, well, there's that. Let's move on to the next article. We're coming up to the big stuff here. The big stuff is coming up, I swear. And I swear. Let's see what might be happening elsewhere in the country. We talk a lot about the, Texas and the cities along there and the border and so on. How about Denver? More people are crossing the U.S. border and are likely headed to Denver. Is the city prepared to serve new migrant arrivals? Okay. And this comes from Denverite. I don't know. I hadn't heard of them before, but I came across the headline and I thought it was interesting. This also comes from September 8th. Texas Governor Greg Abbott's government has bused more than 1,000 people to Denver since May. At its peak in May, Denver saw more than 300 migrants arriving daily in the city from the U.S.-Mexico border. But by June, arrival numbers dropped off into the dozens. Now, arrival numbers are trickling back up. It's interesting. There seems to have been this drop between May and June that everybody's like, look, everything dropped. And then it all shot back up again from July going forward. I'm sure there's something. There's got to be something. Now arrival numbers are trickling back up, in part because of regular bus arrivals from Texas, and in part because overall border crossings rose in July. Denver is currently sheltering nearly 1,000 people. 74 people arrived Thursday. Quote, compared to the end of July, right now we're currently sheltering what is essentially double what we have been sheltering in the last couple of months, so there is an uptick for sure, unquote, said Denver Human Services spokesperson Victoria Aguilar. While the increase in arrivals city, you mean to the city, hasn't forced Denver to mobilize its emergency operations center like it did in December and May, that remains an option, Aguilar said, because the city is, quote, beginning to feel this pressure with the number of arrivals, unquote. Yeah, we'll get to another city feeling pressure momentarily. Denver is also actively working on a request for proposals, or RFP, for contractors to take over the city's migrant response and related services. The details of that are not currently available to the public. Oh, you want to turn over taking care of to private business? I've heard that's a bad idea. I have been told that is a bad idea. Thank you, A2P, for the good luck, have fun, remote control gamer thingy. I don't know how else to put that. It's a game controller that has a smile on its face. And it's telling me good luck, have fun. Thank you, A2P. I appreciate the luck, having fun. Well, I mean, in sort of a sarcastic, cynical, sardonic way, I suppose, reading about border crisis and things. Let's see, quote, our current mayor, Mike Johnson, is definitely working very closely with city agencies, local community leaders to create this new RFP, she said. It will definitely make it easier for local small organizations to bid on more specific services rather than a full scope of care, which was what the previous RFP looked like, unquote. Okay, well, I can immediately see the argument against this. So you're going to turn desperate illegal immigrants or asylum seekers, or whatever you want to classify them as a profit center. Well, if we're going to be building buildings and share, hey, just bring more people in. We get a couple of bucks per head, right? Oh boy. Let's see. Former Mayor Michael Hancock pulled that RFP, a $40 million contract that drew criticism from local advocates, meaning current Mayor Johnson will need to figure out how to accommodate people in the long term. In July, Hancock backed off a contract with security firm Gardaworld. The company would have provided sheltering services for migrants and allowed volunteering city workers to get back to their regular responsibilities. Some city council members and advocates had criticized the contract for its lack of partnership with local nonprofits and questioned the company's track record. That means Denver's existing resources are being used to cover arrival operations in the near future. Oh, good. Immigrants' rights advocates like Jennifer Piper with the American Friends Service Committee, okay, are waiting to see where Johnston will take this. She said she was glad the new mayor took feedback from people in her circles who worked closely with officials on the emergency shelter push earlier this year. But she added Johnston is approaching a deadline. City employees who work in shelters and have been working on the ongoing declared emergency on homelessness only have so much energy, and she worries about what will happen if arrivals tick up suddenly and Denver isn't ready. Quote, I am hopeful that the city of Denver will release a new RFP or grants process by the end of September, she told us. Quote, they absolutely have to get it across the finish line, unquote. She and other advocates are hoping for a solution that disperses migrant shelters across the city, that also includes some kind of transportation to lessen impacts on single neighborhoods and their residents. So you want to set up multiple migrant camps all over the city with continuous transportation. The city will need to figure out a response because more people are crossing the border, meaning more will come to Denver. Ariel Ruiz Soto, a policy analyst with the Migration Policy Institute think tank, said migrant arrivals in Denver mirror what's happening across the U.S. southern border. The sharp fall-off of arrivals this summer was related to federal rules changes in May, which made it riskier for people to cross into the country without authorization. Yeah, and that lasted about a month. And here we are. Quote, what happened in May and early June was that people, migrants, were waiting to see how the policies worked, what of the policies would affect them, and then smugglers, how they would adapt their business marketing, he told us. Well, apparently, necessity is the mother of invention because things are ticking back up again. But apprehensions by U.S. Border Patrol doubled between June and August, according to a report from the Washington Post. Ruiz said that's a sign things are changing again. Quote, people who have been waiting are now more aware of what their options are and are now willing to make the journey, unquote, he said. Yes, and potentially die of heat exhaustion and God knows what else. Ruben Garcia, executive director of the nonprofit Annunciation House in El Paso, where many migrants who arrived in Denver came from, said he's also seen a gradual increase of arrivals from Mexico, though it's not much different than other moments he's witnessed in his decade sheltering migrants. What has changed recently, he said, is a rising level of violence in Ciudad Juarez, right across the border from El Paso, where criminals are preying on people waiting for their chance to enter the U.S. Quote, people are afraid, and so then they cross, he said. It would be no different than what you and I would do, unquote. I suppose, depending, of course, anyway. Ruiz added that Denver has probably made a name for itself in migration circles since the city began providing shelter and resources last year. Yeah, sort of like sanctuary cities in this country, sanctuary states and so on. It's like, oh, all you have to do is make it across the border, guys. We won't call ICE on you. We'll provide you with resources and shelter and jobs and everything else. Like, why wouldn't you roll those dice if you're a desperate person? Quote, it makes sense that when there's an increase of arrivals at the U.S.-Mexico border, that there will be an increase of people arriving in Denver, not only because it's an attractive destination to migrants, but it's also because of the policies that the city has provided and the state has provided as well, he said. Yes, that's correct. That warm welcome was necessary. Okay, Mayor Hancock's original emergency declaration came as migrants who arrived in Denver sometimes ended up in the city's regular homeless shelters, which weren't equipped to serve this population's very specific needs. Such as, I don't know. Failing to address the issue could have stretched homeless shelters to their limits, leaving more people to fend for themselves outside. And the current plan will somehow change that. How? If there's going to be a never-ending arrival of people into your city, and your resources are already spread thin, even the resources you already had built for it. Okay, another reason for the increase, Texas has sent more buses. According to Aguilar, Denver received at least 21 buses from Texas that were chartered by state and local governments. Andrew Mahalaris, if I'm saying that correctly, spokesperson for Texas Governor Greg Abbott, said his state has bused more than 1,000 people to Denver since May, when the first state-chartered bus rolled into town. According to Abbott's office, the migrants arriving on buses from Texas signed voluntary consent waivers to travel to Denver, provided in multiple languages. While Garcia said sympathetic nonprofits are sending plenty of people to interior cities like Denver, Mahalaris made clear Abbott's buses were meant to send a message. Quote, "These hypocritical mayors across the country were all too happy to tout their sanctuary city statuses until Texas bused over 36,000 migrants collectively to their self-declared sanctuary cities," unquote, Mahalaris said in a statement. That's true. That's true. We'll get to that in a moment. Quote, "Sanctuary cities refers to a number of cities, many led by Democrats, that have vowed not to cooperate with federal requests to turn over undocumented immigrants for detainment or deportation." Deportation? Deportation! Is that the French? Okay. Or deportation. In addition to Denver, Abbott's office has also sent buses to Democrat-led cities including Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York City, and Philadelphia. Some of those efforts have made explicit political statements, such as a bus that arrived at Vice President Kamala Harris's residence. When the first bus from Abbott's office arrived in May, Mayor Hancock called the move political theater on the part of Republicans. It was political theater. But it made a point, did it not? Mahalaris placed the blame on President Joe Biden. Quote, "Denver is only dealing with a fraction of what our small border communities deal with on a day-to-day basis." Yeah, when you're talking about, like, we were just talking before about 180,000 immigrants coming in here and there and otherwise, what El Paso has had to deal with for months, if not years now, Denver gets 1,000 people in. Oh, saints preserve us. Instead of complaining about a few hundred migrants sent from Texas, the city of Denver should be calling out President Biden. Until President Biden steps up and does his job, Texas will continue busing migrants to sanctuary cities to provide relief to our overwhelmed border towns, unquote. Yeah, if you're going to call yourself a sanctuary city and a sanctuary state and this, that, and the other, welcome to the club. When Hancock led the effort, he called on the federal government for more resources. He specifically called out Congress's long split between Republicans and Democrats over how the U.S. should approach immigration. Democrats have criticized Republicans, including Abbott, for gilding their frustrated responses to the federal government with racism and cruelty. Wait, what? Democrats have criticized Republicans, including Abbott, for gilding their frustrated responses to the federal government with racism and cruelty. The Republicans have gilded the responses with racism. Did we just ignore the Trump administration? Who was calling who a racist? What? Am I misreading that completely? It's Sunday, my brain's still waking up. Somebody correct me, please. On Wednesday, a federal judge ordered Abbott to remove a barrier his office had placed on the Rio Grande to physically prevent migrants from arriving, calling it a threat to human life, even though there was no evidence that it was threatening human life. So far, Denver has received $3.5 million from the state and more than $9.5 million from the federal government. But the city has also spent more than $23 million on its emergency response so far. In a letter to the mayor's office about 2024 budget priorities, City Council requested that the mayor take into account emergency migrant costs, something the city did not explicitly plan for in 2022 and 2023. Mayor Mike Johnson will release his 2024 budget this month. Oh, I'm sure it'll be a doozy. Ruiz with the Migration Policy Institute said Biden's administration, is putting together more money to help cities accommodate newcomers, through the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Oh, FEMA's doing this now. Oh. So it's like a natural disaster, is it? Okay. Still, how cities fare isn't explicitly a responsibility for the president or the federal government. Hold on. wait. Okay. So, how cities fare isn't explicitly a responsibility for the president or the federal government, even though how cities are faring are a direct result of the president and the federal government's immigration policies, laws, procedures, and so on. Okay. Quote, immigration law is pretty clear and says that the federal government has the authority to say who can come into the United States, but there's no direct requirement for the federal government to supply cities with funding, he said. Yeah, okay. If there's no direct legal requirement, true. There might be a, I don't know, moral / ethical / pragmatic obligation. Because if the cities of the United States, especially those major ones that have declared themselves sanctuary cities and are thus now having to accept more and more people as a result of flawed initiatives, programs, and laws, I think it will become their problem. I think so. And besides which, they're already receiving federal money, so. There is a need for additional funding to keep this operation of housing and assisting migrants going in the city, Aguilar said. I know many other cities across this nation as well are also just really making it loud and clear that we need additional federal funding, unquote. The city is also continuing to take clothing donations at the Richard T. Castro Human Services Center at 1200 North Federal Boulevard between 9 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. on weekdays. The Newcomers Fund, launched by Hancock and Governor Jared Polis, is also continuing to take monetary donations. And this is just with 1,000 plus. Just I'll be conservative. I'll say 2,000 people, right? I mean, by now or within the coming weeks or so, 2,000 people having been bussed in to Denver. This is where they're at. A couple of thousand people, and chaos ensues. Well then. Now, speaking of sanctuary cities and sanctuary states and all that good stuff, let's take a trip back in time, shall we? Let's take a trip back in time to February 8th of 2022. All right, so earlier last year. If I can, that's not going to work, is it? No, of course not. Because I put in the wrong thing. There we go. I don't want the date included along with it. I want this. Okay, here we go. Let's read this, shall we? This is from Route 50, Connecting State and Local Government Leaders. And this is dated February 8th, 2022. The Biden administration's plea to sanctuary cities gets a cool reception. The Department of Homeland Security is trying to foster greater cooperation with local governments on immigration enforcement following the strained relations of the Trump years. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is making a pitch to so-called, as though it's a rumor or something, so-called sanctuary cities that the Biden administration is treating illegal immigrants differently than the Trump White House. Just so you guys know, we're doing this differently. Mayorkas is asking those local governments, which restrict their police from working with federal authorities to catch and detain those in the nation illegally, to rethink their stance. Quote, I'll be coming to you and asking you to reconsider your position of non-cooperation and see how we can work together, Mayorkas said at a gathering of the nation's mayors in Washington last month. Quote, the public safety, the public's well-being, for which we are all charged, is, I think, at issue, unquote, he added. Many local officials, though, aren't buying that immigration and customs enforcement treatment of undocumented people has changed all that much, even with Biden in office, and they are not willing to go along with Mayorkas' plea. Quote, there exist long-standing concerns, even before the past administration, about ICE's tactics and procedures to push non-U.S. citizens into the detention and deportation process, unquote, said a spokeswoman for Philadelphia Mayor Kim Kenney, who said the city will not change how it works with ICE. Okay. Manuel Castro, commissioner of the New York City Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, said the city has no plans to change its policies either. This is why I wanted to read this article. For this specific quote. So let me start out from the top again, just so we're all aware. Manuel Castro, commissioner of the New York City Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, said the city has no plans to change its policies either. Quote, all New Yorkers have the right to live in a city that is safe and inclusive, no matter their immigration status, unquote, Castro said. Quote, the city is proud of and will continue to stand by our laws and policies limiting our cooperation with immigration and customs enforcement, unquote. A spokeswoman for Mayor Eric Adams a retired city police officer who took office in January, agreed with Castro. In Berkeley, California, Mayor Jesse Aragon, I don't know how to say that, noted that the city has had sanctuary policies in place since 1971. Quote, that will not change regardless of who is in the White House until such time that we have provided citizenship to everyone who immigrated to this country and create a clearer, easier path to citizenship, unquote, the mayor said in a statement. Everyone who immigrated to this country, whether they did it illegally or otherwise? Oh, okay. Quote, while I appreciate Secretary Mayorkas' commitment to handling the complex issue of immigration in a more humane way, we cannot risk removing our protections for a future administration to exploit, unquote. You know, I have a feeling, I could be mistaken, that Mayor Jesse Aragon in Berkeley, I bet you when she took office, or he, I guess Jesse could also be a he, that this is the one instance where I can say they as a pronoun because I don't know. They likely swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States. What does the Constitution say right now about who is and is not a legal immigrant? I've made this argument in the past, doesn't matter. Mayorkas, in making his plea at a meeting of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, pointed to new guidelines he issued in September, indicating ICE will no longer target people solely for being in the nation illegally if they are otherwise following the nation's laws. So even if you have violated federal law, as long as you don't violate any other laws, we're not going to... Okay. Yeah. So we're basically, and this isn't any surprise to me or anything, it's just sort of interesting to read it again at this time. We're effectively back to the same kind of policies that were under the Obama administration, if you can believe it. Instead, immigration agents will be required to make, quote, an assessment of the individual, unquote, and to take into account the, quote, totality of the facts and circumstances, unquote, focusing on those posing a threat. Okay, so if someone has come to this country and has, married someone and had like 4 or 5 children, it's like, oh, well, you can't deport me. I'm a parent of these kids that I've made in the time that I've been here illegally and stuff and things. Of course not. Quote, what I want to communicate to you is that the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, the agency of today and what it is focused upon and what it is doing is not the agency of the past. Mayorkas told the mayors. Actually, it is. It's very much the agency of the Obama administration. So, yeah. Quote, we are not engaged in indiscriminate enforcement. Well, I hope not. I hope you're engaged in enforcement of the laws of this country that have to do with someone who is here either legally or illegally. You are engaged in discriminate enforcement. It's true. But we are focused on making our community safe and allowing those who have been contributors to it and productive members of it to allow them to continue in their contributions and their productivity, he said. So if I break the law, but I'm a really good worker, I can stay. All right. In one respect, Mayorkas' message does represent a change from the Trump administration, said Cody Wofsy, a staff attorney with the American Civil Liberties Union Immigrants' Rights Project. It does represent a change because Trump actually, for the most part, enforced the law. And if you want to look on my channel, I have a playlist called Expatriate Games, where a lot of stories, a lot of sob stories came out about people who were being deported after being in the country for decades and never having broken a law and this, that, and the other. And, oh, but they're being deported. And how dare Trump do this? Except if you actually read most of those stories, their issue of deportation was created under the Obama administration. It just wasn't enforced. It's like, yeah, we have to procedurally find you ineligible of being in the country and you should be deported, but we're not going to enforce that. Instead, you just have to check in every month or 3 months or something at the immigration's office and just let us know you're still here. Whereas Trump actually then did, enforce those orders of deportation. But whatever. Let's see. Former President Donald Trump, who made cracking down on illegal immigration a centerpiece of his campaign, sparred repeatedly during his term with local officials from jurisdictions that limited their cooperation with ICE. I wonder why. He argued that local governments were required by federal law to work with federal law enforcement in catching illegal immigrants and to engage in controversial practices like holding suspects arrested for other offenses in jail longer than they would have otherwise been detained until immigration agents could arrive. Again, I am happy to be corrected otherwise, but as far as I know, most mayors in this country and sheriffs and so on and so forth take an oath at the beginning of their service that say that they will uphold and defend the U.S. Constitution. So I think there would be an expectation, a reasonable expectation of any president that local agencies would cooperate with federal law enforcement. Anyway, Trump, in an executive order shortly after taking office, ordered sanctuary cities be barred from receiving federal criminal justice funds. Quote, sanctuary jurisdictions across the United States willfully violate federal law in an attempt to shield aliens from removal from the United States, that order read. Quote, these jurisdictions have caused immeasurable harm to the American people and to the very fabric of our republic, unquote. The order was eventually blocked by the courts, and in April, Biden's Attorney General Merrick Garland formally rescinded it. How's that working out for you? Controversies over sanctuary jurisdictions are complicated by the fact that there is no exact legal definition for what that term means, even though it has become a political flashpoint. Well, I think it is defined by the actions of those that declare themselves such. I think that's what that means. This goes on for a long time, but let's see. I want to specifically focus in on New York. So let's scroll down a little bit. Let's see. Quote, it's wrong to think of sanctuary policies as an anti-Trump movement, Wolfsey said. Well, true, because they existed before Trump came into office. But they were certainly most strident and defiant under Trump's administration because he was actually trying to enforce immigration law. The cities, he said, tend to believe that targeting illegal immigrants actually endangers public safety because witnesses and crime victims are scared to work with the police, a position also pushed by Castro, the New York City immigration official. Quote, these laws and policies make our city safer for all and have helped build trust with our immigrant communities. Unquote, Castro said, quote, our welcoming practices reflect our local expertise and have helped maximize community trust and safety, unquote. Okay, with that in mind, that was, remember, February 8th, 2022. Let us jump ahead into the far distant future of September 8th, 2 days ago. As I pause this video, whatever it is. Mayor Eric Adams says asylum seeker crisis, quote, will destroy New York City. Oh man, here we go. As asylum seekers and their families continue to arrive at the Roosevelt Hotel in Manhattan, recent comments from New York City Mayor Eric Adams are drawing reactions. I mean, that's as generic a statement as you can get, I suppose. Let me zoom in on this a little bit, just on the off chance I can. Is that even better? It's a little better. Okay. During a community meeting on the Upper West Side this week, Mayor Adams said that the ongoing migrant crisis, quote, will destroy New York City, unquote. Quote, never in my life have I had a problem that I didn't see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this, unquote, Adams said. Quote, this issue will destroy New York City, unquote. As more buses arrive at Port Authority, the mayor says the city is severely impacted by the influx of migrants and the city is not getting support from the federal government. Adams said 110,000 asylum seekers have passed through New York City since April 2022, and the issue is creating a $12 billion budget deficit. Well, there was a guy that came to you last year. Mayorkas. I mean, for everything that I could say about Alejandro Mayorkas and how he's administrated or governed his position, they came to you asking for help, and you said, nah, we got it handled. Oh, man. Adams said that 110,000 asylum seekers have passed through New York City since April 2022, and the issues. Yeah, sorry, I repeated myself. I just had to say it again because 110,000 asylum seekers versus what the 1,000, 2,000, let's say, in Denver. Oh boy, Denver, you think you got it bad now. Republican leaders say the mayor is right. Following the comments, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said New York City deserves better. This comes as Republicans have been pushing for Adams to repeal New York City's sanctuary policies. Adams said at one point the asylum seekers were coming from Venezuela, but are now coming from Ecuador. Russian speakers are coming through Mexico, as well as migrants from West Africa. So it doesn't matter where they come from, right? Your statements of previous were just like everybody, etc. And so we're a sanctuary, we're welcoming, everybody can come in. Doesn't matter where they're coming from, right? While other cities have been seeing a growing number of migrant arrivals, New York City has become the epicenter of the crisis. And I have to say, probably by design. Quote, the city we knew, we're about to lose, and we are all in this together, all of us, Adams said. Quote, Staten Island is saying send them out to Manhattan. Manhattan is saying send them out to Queens. Queens is saying send them out to Brooklyn, unquote. Adams has publicly called on Governor Kathy Hochul and President Joe Biden for help with the ongoing crisis. Oh, geez. Hochul said during a discussion Thursday that the state cannot, quote, house the entire world, unquote, and said the answer lies in Washington. She said she has not ruled out a special legislative session to address the surge. And yet a year ago, you were telling the federal government, nah, we got it covered. You guys don't know what you're talking about. We don't trust you. We welcome everybody. Central to what Adams is asking for is expediting work authorizations so that people who are already in New York City would be able to get legal jobs and wouldn't be forced to rely on the social safety net. But the process for applying for asylum and a work permit is based on current immigration laws, which require a 150-day waiting period to apply for work authorization and an additional 30 days to be eligible for approval. And in recent years, it's made more difficult because of an immense backlog. Yeah. A backlog. Where has that backlog been created in the last several years? White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said the Biden administration has been working with city and state leaders and has provided $140 million this year. $140 million. Wow. Not that I'm trying to say incentivize the problem in New York City anymore, but how much have we given to Ukraine in the last 6 months? The Legal Aid Society and the Coalition for the Homeless called the mayor's, quote, dystopian comments, unquote, Wednesday night, quote, reckless and unproductive fear-mongering, unquote. Reckless and unproductive fear-mongering? Oh, is that bad now? I seem to remember like a 4-year-long administration and a 3-year-long pandemic where that was just perfectly fine. Oh, well. Quote, Mayor Adams remarks that the influx of new arrivals, quote, will destroy New York City are reckless and unproductive fear-mongering, the group said in a joint statement, yes. Quote, his dystopian comments dehumanize and villainize people who fled unimaginable situations in their home countries merely for an opportunity to provide for their families and secure a better life. This dangerous rhetoric is something you'd expect from fringe politicians on the far right of the political spectrum, not from the mayor of a city that has always welcomed and celebrated its diverse and critically important immigrant community, unquote. Well, hey there, people from other groups that aren't running a major U.S. city. Guess what? If you behave recklessly in your declarations of welcoming everybody and you get what you ask for and you find out you actually can't deliver, what do? So now Eric Adams is a fringe right-wing radical. It's amazing what a dose of reality will do to somebody. But that's where things are at right now. Washington, D.C., Chicago, Philadelphia, Denver, and Los Angeles are among a host of other cities grappling with arrivals. Well, you guys, the cities in question, you stood on virtue for years in opposition to what you thought were just evil policies and backwards thinking and xenophobic, racist, etc., and so forth, until you come down to the pragmatism of the numbers. And then suddenly everybody becomes a Republican, apparently. Now I'm a conservative. Oh, before, welcome. Oh, whoops, that's too much. You already opened the doors. I can't close the doors. And this is where we're at. And this is where we are at. So I got one more here that is at least partially related to a previous part of another article. I don't know if I can zoom in on this enough to make it worthwhile. Let me try. Not really, because this is a PDF, so that's as good as I can get it. If you're trying to read along, I apologize. That's unfortunately as close as I can get. Before I continue, though, let's see. Comments from anybody in the chat. You're all talking about stuff amongst yourselves. All amongst yourselves. Huh. Okay. Let's see. Scrappy. The city shouldn't need federal support being a sanctuary. I mean, it is interesting to say that we are going to actively defy federal law, but as soon as we need your help, we're asking for support. It is interesting, isn't it? Please help us so we can continue to defy federal law. Give us money so we can actively oppose you and the Constitution. Oh, federal government. Advocatus Diaboli, because because there is no reality in virtue in all sense of the phrase. Again, the best of intentions, right? The road to hell's paved with. I don't know what to tell you. Alice Morgan. Hi, Alice Morgan. How are you doing? Also, Bishop. Who else is here that Quippers United. Or Jack Gunsky. Let's see. Anybody else that I've missed in the meantime? I probably have. Scrolling. Maybe not that many. Okay. Well, either way, those of you there lurking or in the future, hello. All right. So let's get this last one in here because they talked earlier about employment for New York migrants. Here we go. New York employers are eager to hire migrants. They can't. Many Democrats and business leaders favor giving migrants work permits, but pockets of tension and reluctance have created a complex political calculus. This comes from the New York Times on September 9th, so just yesterday. Outside Albany, New York, where hundreds of recent migrants have been bussed upstate from New York City, David Buico, hope I'm saying that right, sees an obvious solution to the labor shortage he and other employers are experiencing. Quote, I'd hire probably 20 people tomorrow, said Mr. Buico, the president of the Galisi Group, a Schenectady-based developer who said prospective workers are still waiting for legal authorization. Quote, it's crazy that we still can't fill a void. We don't have population growth, and we've got people that we're just bringing in, sitting around doing nothing, unquote. Yeah, the law is a crazy thing, isn't it? Mr. Buico is not alone. Across the state, many large and small employers have expressed an overwhelming willingness to hire recent asylum seekers. Migrants are even more eager to work. But bringing the two sides together is far harder than it might seem. Migrants are prohibited by federal policy from securing work permits until 180 days after an asylum application is filed, a process that has resulted in months-long backlogs and has frustrated both business and elected leaders, especially in upstate New York, where farms and small rural towns mix with a series of often hard-strapped Erie Canal cities. Well, here's the thing. What is the process of an asylum application being examined, right? You're trying to examine that this person's claim is legitimate. You're also trying to do a background check on this person to verify that they actually are who they say they are, they're coming from where they say they're coming from, and that this person does not possess any, encumbrances that would otherwise disqualify them from being in the country legally. even under an asylum application. And also, remember, an asylum application does not mean you get to stay in the country for sure. Your application, more likely than not, given certain circumstances these days, will be rejected eventually, and you'll be deported or ordered to be deported. Whether you actually are or not, of course, is up to the federal government, which right now is letting anybody stay in the country, even if they're not supposed to be here, as long as they don't commit any other crimes. So these employers that really want to give jobs to all these people, they may be hiring someone who is not going to do them much favor. But apparently that doesn't matter. Okay, Congress has seemed unwilling to change the 180-day policy because it probably, okay. There's a backlog. There is a incalculable backlog of applications to go through, and they all have to be vetted. They all have to be checked and verified. This is the process. This is the fair, due process that someone applying for asylum is owed and that the country should take to verify what's going on. Why should we change it? Congress has seemed unwilling to change the 180-day policy. President Biden has not indicated whether he will take other steps so some asylum seekers can apply for a work permit sooner. All it's going to take, if they fast track a whole swath of people, all it's going to take is for one criminal to end up into a business and do something of criminality for it all to fall apart. And you roll the dice on that, and somebody gets robbed or hurt or something else, just you wait. The influx of roughly 110,000 asylum seekers in New York City from the southern border has caused logistical, financial, and political headaches for Democrats everywhere, but especially in New York, where it has divided leaders in the usually liberal state and put them in conflict with Mr. Biden. I hate to say it, but Mayorkas came to you guys last year and asked for you guys to change your policies, and you said no. So, the same tensions are evident across the nation, including in deep blue enclaves like California, where buses of migrants have arrived from Republican-led states, and Massachusetts, where the governor and federal elected officials have begged the Biden administration for robust action. Well, those calls have been amplified by the private sector. Late last month, more than 120 business executives, including Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase, sent a letter to Mr. Biden urging him to fast-track work permits. I'm telling you, all it's going to take, one scandal with that process, one person being hurt, one business being damaged financially or otherwise. The same sentiment is shared by business leaders in upstate communities in New York, which have seen workforces slowly drained by decades of out-migration, a trend that was often accelerated and exacerbated by the pandemic. Robert Duffy, a former lieutenant governor who now leads the greater Rochester. Every time I see the word Rochester, I have to say it like Jack Benny. And I don't know why. I wasn't alive for Jack Benny. All I know is that I saw clips of him, and my parents would play old radio shows of him talking about the character Rochester, and he'd say, Rochester. It reflects, I don't know. The Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce estimated that his city has about 6,000 open jobs, many in service industries like landscaping, manufacturing, and hospitality. He noted that some factories and restaurants have cut hours because of lack of labor. Quote, if you want to work and you're willing to work hard, he said, the opportunities are there, unquote. As long as they have achieved a legal work permit, which requires 180 days at minimum, 30 days layover after that, and is tempered by the backlog. The view is largely the same in late. And here's the other thing, too. You want to talk about incentives for people to come to your city? If you just have open work permitting policies in your city, do you think things will get better or worse as far as the influx of people coming into your city? If that practice was true in California, if people on the other side of the border were told, once you get into the city, you will have a work permit within X number of weeks just for showing up. Can you imagine the chaos that would ensue if that news got out to the rest of the world? Or even if the legal part of it was you have to be an actual asylum seeker with an application, do you think that distinction is going to be made readily apparent between the smugglers and their desperate clients? This is the problem with this kind of messaging from cities and administrations in this country, saying that they're open and they've got this, that, and the other. Every time you say there is something free to be had, something easy to be attained in this country that will give somebody a completely new and better life, just on the implication of it, it will be used for more people to be victimized. They may never reach New York. They may never reach California. But if you start making announcements of such things, they will open the doors to more death and destruction. The view is largely the same in Lake George, the tourist-friendly Adirondack town that already uses a large seasonal foreign-born workforce on H-2B visas for temporary workers. Quote, "Our destination is used to working with international workers," said Gina Mintzer, the executive director of the Lake George Regional Chamber of Commerce. "There are definitely jobs for immigrants." Again, there is an effect that goes outside the borders of your town or state when you make these statements. Okay? This is the thing that these guys seemingly just either don't consider or are completely ignoring. You know, people dying of heat exhaustion. People risking their own children, idiots that they are, because of language like this, because of rhetoric like this. Still, there are also pockets of opposition, both personal and political, to hiring the new migrants. Ray Dykman, a dairy farmer in upstate New York, acknowledged that he simply could not run his business without migrant laborers who have long fed his cows, cleaned their stalls, and worked their way into his heart. Aww. Okay, that's very romantic right there. Quote, "They're absolutely phenomenal," Mr. Dykman said. "They're friends and family," unquote. But asked if he would take on a group of recently arrived asylum seekers, Mr. Dykman was dubious. Quote, "Do I want to take a chance on a bunch of people that they just trucked in?" he said. No. Gosh, Mr. Dykman sounds like a pragmatist, doesn't he? The migrant crisis, which Mayor Eric Adams warned this week could lead to New York City's demise, well, he said destruction, but okay, either way, has similarly alarmed voters. A recent Siena College poll showed that 4 out of 5 New Yorkers consider the migrant issue to be a serious or very serious problem, with a majority suggesting that officials should work to, quote, "slow the flow," unquote, into the state. Is New York going to turn red? I tell you, Mr. Adams' decision to bus migrants far north and west of New York City earned the ire of an array of county officials who have taken executive actions and filed lawsuits to stop the flow of asylum seekers to their communities. These legal actions have been accompanied by an array of demonstrations and angry rhetoric, including at Gracie Mansion, where a late August protest turned violent, and on Staten Island, where hundreds of demonstrators descended on Tuesday to loudly oppose a temporary shelter. Oppose a temporary just a temporary shelter. Imagine if they start declaring permanent shelters. Conflicts have also arisen in Democratic cities like Buffalo, with a local SUNY college, Buffalo State, evicting dozens of migrants from dormitories after 2 asylum seekers were recently arrested and accused of committing sexual assaults in nearby hotels. Those accusations led to the Democratic county executive, Mark Polankars, to say, quote, "Our community's trust and good faith have been betrayed," unquote. Yeah. And like I say, just you wait until a fast-tracked work permit puts somebody into a position to hurt someone. And even if there were broader support in more rural parts of the state, there is still considerable reluctance to agreeing to anything that Democratic leaders favor. Assemblyman Chris Tague, who represents a district west of Albany, said that many farmers in his district harbor grudges against Democratic lawmakers for their perceived hostility to the state's agriculture industry. Quote, "The government makes it so hard for us to manage and fall within the regulations, and now all of a sudden, they just want to throw these folks to us," said Mr. Tague, a former dairy farmer, adding, quote, "You want us to come in and save the day," unquote. Oh boy. In New York City, the job outlook is complicated. Muddied by an uneven recovery from COVID, the city's unemployment rate remains above the national average and still higher than before the pandemic, especially among Black residents. But some sectors of the city's economy, such as restaurants, have roared back to life, reaching pre-pandemic job levels. Home health care has seen explosive growth. There are 57,000 more home health care aides in the city today than before the pandemic, according to state data. Tourism has also largely bounced back, said Richard Marocco, the president of the Hotel and Gaming Trades Council, a hotel workers union. Quote, "You have an industry across this country that is desperate for workers and a potential workforce that's desperate for work," Mr. Marocco said. Quote, "And the only thing keeping them from solving each other's problems is the federal restrictions on migrants working," unquote. Can you imagine a reason for those restrictions in the first place, Mr. Marocco? A stranger shows up to your door. Tell you what, how about this scenario, Mr. Marocco? Picture your most prosperous hotel, right? You're part of the hotel workers union. Your most prosperous hotel. A stranger shows up to the door and says, "I want a job." The owner or manager of the hotel waits about 10 minutes looking at this person and then gives them a job. Doesn't ask any questions, doesn't do a background check, doesn't find out any other information about this person, and lets them work at the hotel. Okay. Mr. Marocco, would you consider this hotel manager a wise individual or a reckless individual? If your decision is the latter, think about what you are suggesting. Restaurateurs such as Danny Meyer, best known for founding Shake Shack, have stood beside Mayor Adams and Governor Kathy Hochul to clamor for expedited work permits, saying restaurants were struggling to find cooks, dishwashers, and busboys. Immigrants have long formed the backbone of the industry, filling jobs that don't necessarily require English or previous experience. They often work off the books, which could bring owners into legal peril. As well they should. Quote, "Restaurant owners are prepared to hire them, but they want to do it lawfully." Do they? Doesn't sound like it. Said Andrew Rigi, I don't know how to say that, the executive director of the New York City Hospitality Alliance, a trade group. Quote, "Clearly, there's not enough Americans that are filling the available jobs, and migrants that are seeking asylum want to work," unquote. Clearly, there's not enough Americans that are filling the available jobs. Yeah, well, okay. If you're willing to pay people pennies in wages to avoid legal constrictions, I can see why. Other business leaders concurred. Kathy Wild, the president of Partnership for New York City, the business group that organized the letter to Mr. Biden, said the crisis has, quote, "reached a point where it's not just a humanitarian crisis, but a real threat to the city's fiscal and economic condition," unquote. Well, you want to go back in time to last year where they were coming to you saying, "Hey, sanctuary cities, you might want to change your policies," and you said no? Don't get me wrong. Even if they had gone along with Mayorkas a year ago, there'd still be a problem. It just might be a lesser problem. Some were more blunt. Quote, "It's just stupid," said Heather Brisenti Mulligan, the chief executive officer of the Business Council of New York State. Quote, "I mean, we're paying for them to sit in hotel rooms when they want to work. We have jobs that need people, and we can't match them up," unquote. Okay, tell you what, this lady and everybody else, if you want to put your personal name and seal of approval on fast-tracking work permits to unverified and unvetted people coming into this country through questionable means and questionable motives, go ahead. Put your names at the top of the policy, right? Make it the Marocco Mulligan policy. So that when things go awry, and they will, everybody knows whose fault it is. If you're not willing to do that, ask yourself why. Without work permits, many recent asylum seekers have begun seeking jobs and informal gigs in the so-called underground economy. The so-called? It is, what? Where they may be more susceptible to lower wages and exploitation. Yeah. Employers may be fined for hiring people without proper work authorization, but enforcement is relatively lax. Yeah, okay. So again, if your policy incentivizes people to come to your city seeking a free ride and work and shelter and everything else, you think that's going to go down? No. If you don't enforce the law, if you don't punish people for employing people illegally, it will continue. Jorge Rodriguez, 39, came to Manhattan from his home in Maracay. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Venezuela last year with $100 in his pocket, having trekked through the infamous jungle stretch between Colombia and Panama known as the Darien Gap. Since then, he's been able to find odd construction jobs, commuting to work to Staten Island and installing new wooden floorings, making closets, or building swimming pools. He earns around $150 per day, enough to send money home and rent a room in New Lots, Brooklyn. New Lots, Brooklyn. Okay. Still, he'd like to work more and legally. Quote, without papers to work, you can't grow much, he said. Sometimes if they offer you something better or where jobs are needed, they ask for papers, and without that, people take advantage, unquote. Gosh, if only there was somebody enforcing the laws to stop them from taking advantage of people, but apparently, whatever. Late last month, Miss Hochul, you mean Governor Hochul? Miss Hochul, interesting, said she would spend $36 million to assist with migrant case management in upstate New York, noting possibilities for agriculture jobs, an idea that New York Farm Bureau has backed, while noting it was, quote, a temporary Band-Aid for a greater problem that must be solved in Washington, unquote. Yes, it must be solved in Washington in part, but you need to cooperate with the federal laws and authorities. And imagine if you had started doing that last year when Mayorkas came to you and said, hey, help us out. And you guys said, nah. Again, I don't want to give too much credit to Homeland Security or Mayorkas, but, pragmatism's pragmatism. The rules are the rules. Either you are going to cooperate with the federal government enforcing federal law, or you're not, and you will reap the rewards thereof. That idea may nonetheless appeal to people like Giorgio Velasco, 40, a middle school physics and mathematics teacher in Bogota, Colombia, who fled a gang of drug dealers to come to the United States. Currently working off the books in the city, he says he would consider coming upstate for a farm job. Quote, I'm originally from the countryside. I know about milking cows, plowing the land, he said, adding he would like to leave a makeshift tent shelter he's staying at on Randall's Island. Quote, I would prefer a more permanent job working in the fields than a delivery job being exposed to all the risks here in the city, unquote. Okay. For his part, Mr. Dykeman says he feels deeply connected to the immigrant laborers on his farm about 40 miles west of Albany, where he built a soccer field for those workers to use when they aren't milking and feeding his cattle. He says he's not sure if other farmers would hire asylum seekers, but his mind seems made up. Quote, it's just not going to work for me, he said. I want to stick with the people that I got there, unquote. I want to stick with the people that I got there. Okay, I don't know if he actually brought them there or just he's pointing over in that direction as I got there. Either way, Mr. Dykeman is the most reasonable of everybody I've read in this article so far. It's no, I don't want unvetted, unverified people, strangers showing up out of nowhere and just being put into my business. That doesn't make sense. But all these other trade associations yes, no, we need more workers. We need to fill up these spots. We need to, hey, well, there you go. That is the Border News Roundup Digest. I don't know that I have anything else to add to it so much. It is sad comedy watching what's going on in New York right now, knowing the position New York took just a year ago. Statements made by Mayor Adams back in 2021, before he became mayor and after his election, or just before his election, pardon me. and then statements and positions that they took after run in stark contrast to the current situation. And it was all foreseeable. It has been foreseeable for years. The trends have been ongoing in California and other places for years. Did New York think it wasn't going to come and bite them? Apparently so. And now what? Well, now on the on the topic of immigration, apparently New York is now a right-wing state. And the tragedies just continue. And like I said, these officials in these states, these short-sighted individuals making these declarations about what they want to have happen and the policies they want, they're trying to solve the problem by facilitating the problem. They're trying to solve the problem by making it worse. And not just, again, I want to make this point very clear, not just worse in their own cities. When a politician or a person in charge makes a public statement saying or indicating that if you come to this city, you'll be given free stuff, a shelter, food, a job, a better life, and onward and onward. This stuff is turned into propaganda used by nefarious forces and transmogrified by desperate people into reasons to risk their and their children's lives to come here. That's the problem that none of these guys seem to think about. They can't see beyond their own frickin' neighborhood, and instead they just make these declarations without considering the consequences far afield. And so the number of people dying at the border, or dying to get to the border, or being abused or trafficked, or in other ways harmed by criminal elements will go up. The more that you are using this desperation to try to make the problem better by making it worse for other people. It's nuts. It's nuts. And tell you what, for all of their flaws, the federal government, whoever's running the administration, trying in some way, shape, or form to defend and enforce federal law, and cities outright denying them and opposing them and obstructing them from doing so, this is what you get. And now they're asking the federal government for help. Oh, golly. And unfortunately, they need to get it because they can't do it on their own, apparently. These cities don't know what to do about it. Denver has got a whole extra 1,000 people, and they don't know what to do. Just wait, Denver. You just wait. Renovatio. I'm old enough to remember when the left were against mass immigration, claiming it was used by the capitalist right to replace native workers and diminish workers' power. Yes, I am that old. It swings back and forth every 10 years or something, doesn't it? Let's see. Advocatus Diaboli. Hell, even their own home countries tell them they can't wait to get rid of their own people. The more people who want a better life leave these countries, it's easier for despots to stay in power. Right. Any possible population of actual resistance or change is out the door. And then, it just perpetuates the situations in those countries because there's no opposition party because they're all leaving. They don't have any support. They don't have any public, general support. They get overrun. I don't like covering this stuff. I don't enjoy it. I could just ignore it just for my own sanity, but this is the world we live in. Anyway, everybody, I'm at the 1.5 hour mark. I'm going to call it here. Thank you guys so much for joining me. My voice is starting to fail me, but because I'm talking so long. So if you have any comments that I missed in the course of the stream, please leave them in the comments below after the stream is posted. Programming note, Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern will be the next episode of TED Excellence. I'll take a look at another off-brand TED Talk. But also tonight, Sunday night, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, will be the latest episode of Book Review of the Vampire, where my friend Leonora and I are reading through The Vampire Lestat. We have just, or at least I have, I don't know about Leonora, she might have already read it. We've just finished the chapter called The Children of Darkness. So if you are reading along, be sure to finish that chapter. which is also a true crime channel, by the way, before we get there. So again, that'll be 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern tonight, Sunday night. And with that, everyone, thank you so much for joining me for this cynically, sardonically humorous tragedy that we just keep seeing again and again and again. Again, let me know what your comments are in the comments below. Leave a like on the way out if you would. If you like this kind of thing, please share it as well. And everyone, I hope you have a good rest of your Sunday. Moderators, thanks for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very little to do. Everybody who donated, either to myself or to the fundraisers I completely forgot to mention at the top of the chat box. I am terrible. I apologize. At the top of the chat box, there are fundraisers there for our friends Joshua, Maddie, and Lisa. Joshua needs some help with some financial pitfalls that have hit him. Maddie needs some help with paying for some deductibles for her cancer treatment, so please take a look at that one. And Lisa and her boyfriend need to pay for medical expenses for their dog, which is always no fun. So please take a look at those. Donate if you can. If you can't, that's fine. But if you can, share those out on social media. That would be appreciated as well. And before I forget, I also have a Discord server. So let me put a link to that up real quick. 1 second, pardon me, while I get that there. If you are not already a member of the Discord, click on that link. You'll find yourself on the landing channel called Say Hello. And in addition to saying hello, you also have to say the secret word. The secret word tells me and my moderators that you actually watched the stream and are thus a member of the audience. So today's secret word is buoy. Sure, that's random enough. Buoy. Not David Bowie, although I'll accept that too now that I've said it, but buoy, as in the buoy barrier. Everyone, again, have a good rest of your Sunday, rest of your weekend. Hope you have a good week ahead of you. I hope you are all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.